Boo! What's that old iPad doing there? Aren't the new iPads supposed to not have the home button and those ugly bezels? You're right, this is not the latest iPad. How can you tell? Look, it has a home button. But what you're wrong about is that you're calling it old. This is the 2019 third generation iPad Air. It's only 5 years old. And you can probably tell from my average Apple fanboy impression, people say that its design reeks of age. But I don't think it looks that old. The design is timeless, and the bezels are thinner compared to the ninth generation iPad. It has that distinct Apple look to it, and it's what I think makes this iPad's design unique, unlike the newer iPads where it's just a slab of glass at the front. Like, come on, that's easy to copy. But I'm here to talk more than just about that. I'm going to talk about its specs, its performance in the real world, and why I think this iPad is a bang for your buck right now for its value and if you just want to have more Apple devices in your Apple ecosystem. First, let's talk about the price. This 2019 iPad Air is a 256GB model, and it can get this much storage for as low as $300 on the used market. I got this one in gold because I think it's the prettiest color for this particular iPad. Pair that with this $129 smart keyboard, and you just got yourself a proper productivity tablet that can get work things perfectly fine. All of this comes at a total of just $429. Of course, you can get one for cheaper, but come on, 64 gigs is not enough for today's standards, and apps are constantly getting bigger and bigger in terms of file size. Now let's talk about the specs. This iPad Air is packed with Apple's 6-core A12 Bionic processor, the same ones found on the iPhone XS, XS Max, and XR. It also has 3 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. Next, the cameras. They are not the best, but seriously, cameras on iPads are less prioritized because no sane person would use a giant slab of glass as a photography tool, but it's nice to have it there. Both cameras on this iPad took okay pictures in proper lighting, and that's thanks to the image signal processing done by the A12 Bionic chip. Without it, it'll probably look worse. On low light, it's pretty expected to be grainy and noisy, because through a lens that's smaller than a coin, it's not going to gather many light. As for video recording, both cameras can record up to 1080p 30fps, and quality is acceptable with proper lighting. And on low light, the video looks grainy and noisy. The slow-mo on the back camera is more of a gimmick, but it's funny seeing doing slow-mo stuff. Again, cameras on iPads are not really that important, and most people who own an iPad would probably already have a proper phone that can take better images than this. But it's nice and convenient to have it there, and I'll give it a pass. Next is the display. It's amazing. It's not OLED or anything, not even 120Hz, because Apple for some reason is stubborn on putting high refresh rate displays on non-pro iPads. On a bright, humid, hot, and sunny weather, the display is pretty viewable on max brightness. It also has a wide P3 color gamut, which means it can basically show more colors than sRGB. What does it mean for users, you might ask? Well, if you're a regular user, you'll probably just skip the color gamut bit. However, for artists who are looking to create art with lots of colors, they're gonna take advantage of that. Now, I'm not an artist myself, but I think they can make use of that wider color gamut for more color palettes. As for battery life, it's actually quite acceptable. Now, since this iPad is second-hand, the battery has obviously been consumed, and according to Coconut Battery, this iPad only has about 80% of its maximum capacity. Honestly, I wasn't expecting a great battery life out of this, considering the fact that it's heavily used. For the speakers, well, you can take a listen through the sample recordings that I've made, but I feel like I have to keep stressing this bit out, otherwise the audiophiles are gonna hunt me down and kill me. This is not an exact representation of how the speakers sound like, because it's recorded with an iPhone, and the acoustics in my room is not the best. It's also been through YouTube's compression, which makes the recording lose some of its detail, but really it's just a point of reference. And for the sake of comparison, I'm gonna use my MacBook Pro speakers to compare. Not a fair comparison, but it's just for fun. Take a listen. Yeah, not the greatest speakers, and it's not even up to par with the newer iPads which had better speakers. I am quite impressed though that there are bass frequencies being pulled out of a seemingly thin chassis. It's not a big base, but you can feel it. Finally, for biometrics, you get Touch ID, which is fast and arguably secure. And now let's jump into performance. First up, benchmarks. Firing up Geekbench 6 on the iPad Air and running the CPU benchmarks, we got a single score of 1314 and a multi-core score of 2890. As for the GPU benchmarks, with the Metal API, it got a score of 9877. Next, let's look into the productivity side of things and see how it'll perform on real-world tasks. First, web browsing and general social media browsing. Obviously, this iPad is a champ on browsing the web. I mean, pretty much any tablet will let you read and scroll through web articles. I will say though that this iPad has some drawbacks. On some web articles where there are a ton of distracting elements, the iPad can get pretty unstable, but it won't get to the point where it's completely unusable. So overall, this iPad will do web browsing perfectly fine. As for social media browsing, oh, come on, what do you expect? Of course this iPad will do that just fine. I don't see many slowdowns when browsing Instagram and Twitter. When watching videos on YouTube, I don't really see any major slowdowns as well, even when watching something in HDR. It can even play 4K videos, though I think it's quite useless because the display is not 4K in the first place, and you're basically just wasting your data plan for nothing. I'd rather just use 1440p because I think it still provides better quality than 1080p, and it loads faster with my slow, garbage-own ISP that I have. And just for funnies, you can even load the desktop version of YouTube on Safari, though I think it's way more finicky to navigate. And now let's move on to multitasking. Yeah, iPadOS barely has true multitasking because all the apps are designed with touch and utilizing the full screen in mind. That doesn't mean to say that it can't do some multitasking. iPadOS lets you do pseudo-multitasking, where you can drag an app over an open app to do a split view or slide over. Here I have the Notes app, YouTube on the side, and Discord and slide over. They all work perfectly together, and I don't see any major slowdowns. Yeah, this gets the job done. It's cool that I can do 2 or 3 things at once, but damn it, I have some complaints. Why is the window size limited? When you do a split view, you'll get this thin black bar on the middle, and that lets you adjust the size of the app windows. And to me, it felt a little weird on how they only let you pick between different fixed sizes. Why can't I customize it my own? Next is slide over. Slide over is sort of like an iPhone app in picture-in-picture mode, but thinner. If you only have a single app open, slide over view can definitely be useful, especially when I want to focus on my full screen app. I find myself using slide over quite a lot, but only when there's one full screen app open. When you're using split view and slide over at the same time, oh man, everything just looks messy, cluttered, and just looks harder to navigate. At the same time, why doesn't Apple allow you to have 3 split view apps open at the same time? Look, they allow you to have a window as thin as a fucking churro, but why not have 3 thin windows? I mean, they're still usable. At the very least, I can truly multitask without having to constantly move my hand to the slide over window to move it when I want to see the content that's over the slide over window. Oh my god, Apple! Another thing, why aren't all apps compatible? I can have YouTube on split view, but not YouTube Studio? And great, I can't use Instagram at the same time? For the love of Apple, when it's an iPhone app, at least have the mercy to let us use it as a slide over app. Look at this! This would have looked fine as a slide over app, but nope, you can't. You can only use it as an oversized iPhone 5S app. And if apps are multitasking compatible, why do some work as intended and others don't? For example, here I have the Notes app opened and Microsoft Teams on slide over. Let's say I want to do some note taking. I open a PDF file on Microsoft Teams and start skimming through the document. I started a new note on the Notes app, and then I realized, oh man, the workspace is too distracting. Alright, let's close Teams and wrote some notes. But then, oh shit, I forgot some stuff. I may have to look at the document again. And when I reopen Teams, the f***ing PDF closes on its own without my discretion. I tried closing all apps and redo the same thing again because I think it's a RAM issue, and the same exact thing happens. And now we have 2 sides to blame. One is Apple, and one is the app developer. All in all, multitasking is pretty much garbage on iPadOS. Notice how I say iPadOS and not the iPad. Because iPadOS is iPadOS. I don't like how iPadOS limits with what you can do and what you can't. You can't use multitask apps where the developer of said app hasn't developed a multitasking behavior for it. You can't customize the size of your windows freely. You can't open PDFs and leave it in the background in Microsoft Teams. But ignoring the flaws, at the very least, Apple still lets you sort of multitask, though not truly multitask. And now, finally, let's turn to gaming. I don't really play many games on my iPad, and I play games mostly on a dedicated gaming console and my Mac via Windows. As a result, I don't really have much games to test the performance of this iPad. That's not to say that I don't have games on my iPad. I actually do. But most of the games I play on my iPad are fairly simple for the iPad to run, such as Pocket Camp, Mario Kart Tour, Mario Run, and Taiko no Tatsujin. I can't really comment much on the game performance, but I'm very sure that this iPad will still deliver relatively okay performance on most modern games. The only issue, though, is that when you quit and open a memory-hungry app such as YouTube or Safari, your game process will be killed, and restarting could definitely be a pain. Again, that's probably because of the 3 gigs of RAM that Apple pairs this processor with. Now let's move on to the accessories that I have on my iPad. First is the Smart Keyboard. The accessory connects through the Smart Connector on the left side of the iPad, and I have no idea on how to describe this. I mean, it's cool that I can have a hardware keyboard that's compact. At least I can get more screen real estate when I type. The typing experience is not that great. The keys feel very mushy, and pressing the spacebar is really awkward. But I like the noise that it makes when I type. It really makes me sound like I'm a serious businessman. Apple also touts this Smart Keyboard as a case. Well, barely a case, at least for me. When it's closed, it has this weird bump that I find quite intrusive, and it only protects the screen and not the back. What kind of case is this? I can't complain much though, because it sure does function as a keyboard. Another accessory that I have is this first gen Apple Pencil. I mainly use this for note-taking and maybe some light sketching, and it did the job for me. Not much else to say on this one. So, what can I conclude? After using this for more than 6 months, I can say that the experience with this iPad is delightful. While it's not the latest and greatest, the 3rd gen iPad Air still delivers exceptional performance for productivity work and an acceptable gaming performance that'll surely fulfill the needs of an iPad kid, though I wouldn't suggest giving any kind of internet exposure to your children until they're 12 or 13. While there are some slowdowns, especially during heavy workloads, I don't really find it quite intrusive. For those of you who might ask, Daniel, why are you being an idiot and buy a 5-year-old iPad instead of the newer iPads where you can clearly gain even more performance and new iPadOS support for a longer time? First of all, please don't call me an idiot, because I made good financial decisions. Well, don't look at that. Don't look at that! Don't look at that! I already have a MacBook Pro myself as my main productivity and the do-it-all machine. I don't need another overpriced machine that'll add next to nothing to increase my productivity. Plus, I think I'd waste my money as well, because I don't really do much powerful stuff on an iPad that'll truly take the full advantage of the processor. And if I want to do something like video editing, I'll probably do that on my Mac. I'm also the same insane, masochistic person who lugs around this 16-inch MacBook Pro wherever I go. I also said earlier, I don't play much games on my iPad. Even if they were pretty simple for the iPad to run. To me, iPads are pretty much a multimedia machine, a device simply to consume media. In short, I think the 3rd generation iPad Air is still a capable device this time around, and while you can buy the newer iPads, which had better performance, this iPad serves as a middle ground to me, where you can have a taste of iPadOS without being guilty of spending thousands of dollars on wasted potential. From its beautiful screen, great performance, and battery life, this iPad is a bang for your buck. It will happily serve you emails, web content, and lets you be productive, as well as serving as a backup productivity machine, just in case if your Mac dies. And yeah, that's about it really.